In this module, we will learn the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of the sequence activities process. In projects, not all work can begin at the same time. When building a house, the foundation must be complete before putting up the framing, and the framing must be done before electrical or plumbing work can begin. Determining the order that project work can be completed in is an important step in project scheduling. Sequence activities is the process of identifying and documenting the logical relationships, such as dependencies, leads, and lags, between project activities. The PMBOK guide defines 5 key inputs to the sequence activities process. The schedule management plan describes how this process will be performed. This may include the dependency types that will be used, the format for documenting dependencies, and the frequency of iteration. Since the scope baseline describes the entire scope of work, it will be required to better understand the relationships and dependencies that exist within the work. The activity list, activity attributes, and milestone list were all outputs of the define activities process. Together, they will provide the level of detail required to sequence the schedule activities of the project. Enterprise environmental factors can be an input to defining the activity sequence. These may include government standards, stakeholder culture, and the organization's existing infrastructure and tools. Finally, organizational process assets may contribute a network diagram template, lessons learned, or provide organizational policies and guidelines. There are 3 tools and techniques for the sequence activities process. Precedence diagramming method, or PDM, is a technique of designing a network diagram using nodes to represent activities and using arrows to represent dependencies connecting the nodes. This technique is also known as AON, or activity on node. In the example pictured, activities A and D are represented by rectangular nodes. The arrow pointing from A to D represents a dependency, meaning that D cannot start until A is completed. Dependency determination is used to classify dependency relationships. Mandatory dependencies, or hard logic, represent dependencies without alternatives. The work must be performed in the specified order due to a legal or contractual obligation or because of the nature of the work. Discretionary dependencies, or soft logic, represent a dependency that is preferred but not required. These dependencies must be well documented since they may contribute unnecessary schedule delays. Internal dependencies are relationships between activities that are fully within the scope of the project. External dependencies are when project activities depend on other activities that are beyond the scope of the project. Leads and lags is the documentation of required space or overlap built into the dependencies of project activities. Lag represents the required space between activities, while lead represents the required overlap. It is important to document any assumptions that are made in this process. An example of lag may be waiting for concrete or paint to dry in between 2 activities. An example of lead may be beginning proofreading before the writing is complete. There are 2 outputs of the sequence activities process. Project schedule network diagrams are a graphical approach to display project schedule activities and the dependencies between them. The purpose of a network diagram is to document the sequences that exist in the work of the scheduled activities. It does not need to communicate the length of the activities nor the dates they are planned to be performed. Project documents, such as activity attributes, may be updated as the team is more closely examining the relationships and dependencies that exist in the project work. Sequence activities is the process of identifying and documenting logical relationships such as dependencies, leads, and lags between project activities. Since the PMBOK guide presents several discrete processes and respective outputs for schedule planning, it is important to differentiate between each on the exam. For example, do you know the purpose of an activity list versus the purpose of a network diagram?